I see some familiar faces in here. Thank you for being here today, and also to the organizers of this event for really allowing us TED speakers to elaborate and speak on topics that we think are important, right? So the topic I'm going to be talking about today is locational privilege. And it's a topic and a word that I admittedly made up, but it's definitely affected everyone in this room, and hopefully we can start some discussion around it. It's a simple idea that people who grow up and reside in certain cities have an advantage over others, right? Now, the only way I can tell this story is through my own personal lens. So I grew up in South Florida in a town called Deerfield Beach, which is about 30 to 45 minutes north of Miami. Now, it's really a culturally rich area with some of the largest populations of Cubans, Haitians, and Brazilians anywhere in the United States. Now, I'm really proud of being from South Florida. It really is really culturally rich, but there's a limit to what you're exposed to growing up in South Florida. Compared to a kid from San Francisco or New York City, South Floridians in general have a more restrictive view of the world. When you grow up in those innovation hubs, you're surrounded by so much activity, and you have a network of out-of-the-box thinkers and visionaries that really expand what you believe you can achieve in this world. Now, this isn't just a opinion of mine. We can actually quantify exactly which cities in the United States are the most innovative. So if you use biotech and biopharma as an example, being that biotech is a pretty good indicator of how innovative a city is, being that's an innovative field in itself. We can use metrics such as VC funding, NIH funding, patents awarded to companies in the cities, and also the amount of talent available there. And we can rank which cities are the most innovative in the United States. And no matter what metrics you use or how you weigh them, the results come out to be about the same. So you have Boston, San Francisco, and New York City. These are the most innovative cities in the United States. This is where most of the innovation is cultivated. Now, South Florida simply isn't on that list. We're mostly known for our clubs, the beaches, and really the drug trafficking that built the Tri-County area. But we did have our own form of innovation, our own form of VC funding, and that was through sports, football in particular. It was the only way we had seen that we could make it out of our circumstances. If you went to a low-income public school growing up in South Florida, it was the only example we had seen that worked. And we had many examples to look forward to. We had Eddie Jones, who played here on the Lakers about 10 years ago, to more recent examples, like Jason Pierre-Paul of the Giants, Bernard Robinson of the Jaguars, Patrick Peterson of the Cardinals, just to name a few. These were the examples that we looked to achieve affluence coming from a less privileged background. You can simply go to the Wikipedia page of any public school in South Florida and scroll down to the notable alumni section. I've put my high schools on here, and as you can see, there's no entrepreneurs, there's no law firm partners, there's no CEOs. It's simply football players, athletes, maybe a musician here or there. So the paths to success seem very limited. It didn't seem like we had many options to look forward to. And if football didn't work out, or sports didn't, which often it doesn't for the majority of people, it didn't seem like there was any way we could make a living for ourselves otherwise. So let's do a simple exercise. Let's take a kid from San Francisco, and then let's take another kid from South Florida of the equal wealth and intelligence. Which one is more likely to found their own startup? Which one is more likely to know someone in their network who has founded their own startup? And then ask yourselves, which one probably has a better football team at their high school? And that is locational privilege in a nutshell. It's a simple theory that postulates that people who grow up in a certain city have an advantage over others. It's a component of both access to innovation and access to a network of people and out-of-the-box thinkers. Now, it's one component of the greater privilege discussion that we've been having. And the other components are the socioeconomic part, how much money your family has, and obviously the racial component of privilege as well. Now, this has been a pretty decisive issue recently, mostly because it's centered around the racial topic, which certainly is a factor, but there are other topics that must be considered when thinking about the overarching idea of privilege. And this idea was brought to me in this very room last year during one of the Focus Fridays that KGI puts on. The keynote speaker at this event was a gentleman by the name of Nigel Hooks, and he's the CEO of a data analytics company called DataSkill. And he's also the captain and owner of his own offshore powerboating team. So Nigel has a very eccentric Richard Branson British man aura about himself, right? So he spoke here at this very podium and told about how his childhood influenced what he did later on in his life. So he grew up in Buckinghamshire, England, which is about 10 miles away from Bletchley Park. This is where the famous code breakers assembled during World War II, made famous by the movie Imitation Game. And Nigel spoke of how, as a kid, he often visited Bletchley Park, and how the feats of Alan Turing were taught in his school, and how that grew his love and inspired him to go into computer science. He also grew up very close to the location of the British Grand Prix, and spoke of how the culture of Formula One racing had a big impact in his life as a child. He has somehow been able to merge his two passions of computer science and Formula One racing later on in his life. But we have to ask ourselves, if it was not for where he grew up and being exposed to that early on in his life, would he even have been able to believe that these were attainable feats to achieve? A more prominent example of locational privilege is that of Bill Gates. So he has a very interesting story. He actually grew up in the 60s in Seattle, right before the computer revolution hit. And he attended a private school called Lakeside. Now, Lakeside in 1968 purchased this brand new technology called a timeshare computer terminal, which really made programming far more user-friendly and easier. Now, just to imagine, very few colleges at this time had access to this technology. But as an 8th grader, Bill Gates had access to this very innovative technology, and that's what really grew his love for computer science and programming. Not only that, he also lived walking distance away from the University of Washington, where in his high school days, he spent his days and nights, countless hours programming, and really honing his craft. Due to his location, he had access to these amazing technologies and allowed him to achieve the feats that he did later on in his life. Now, obviously, there's other components that have to be considered here when talking about Bill Gates. He really is the perfect example of all three forms of privilege in one person, right? So we talk about his location. He grew up in Seattle, had access to all these computers, amazing technology. But the socioeconomic factor has to be taken into account too. He was able to go to this private school, his dad being a law firm partner at his own firm, and his mother coming from a long line of very successful bankers, right? And obviously his racial component as well. So I hope that I've kind of set the stage for how important locational privilege is. Now, I'm in no way complaining about being from South Florida. I feel like the access to different cultures and people from different socioeconomic backgrounds is an asset to me and really shapes the way I view the world. But it's definitely something that has to be considered. Just talk to someone from New York or talk to a kid from San Francisco. They're bursting with ideas because there's so much activity going on around them. They see that there's so much in this world that they can achieve. And this impacts every facet of life, from musical preference to culinary palate to even things as simple as where am I going to go on vacation this year. But most importantly, it broadens the view of what an individual believes they can achieve in their life. But there is good news. Locational privilege can be overcome. Simply by moving to a new place, you can internalize some of the advantages that that location has to offer. And we've seen many examples of this. So in the story of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg moves to San Francisco, internalizing the advantages that that location has to offer, building his business, and seeking from the talent pool that is in Silicon Valley. My favorite example is that of Kevin Durant. So I'm a big basketball fan. And last season, Durant moved from Oklahoma City to the Golden State Warriors. And he was berated in the media for doing so. But it was really a smart decision on his part, and he definitely considered locational privilege to be a component of that. The advantages that the Bay Area offers simply wouldn't be able to be had in Oklahoma City. So in his spare time now, he takes pitches from tech startups and works as an angel investor, really being able to grow his legacy beyond that of just a basketball player. So in conclusion, I hope I've kind of showing you how important locational privilege is, and it's some of the considerations you can make in your own life. As an early career professional, I have to think, what location can I go to that I can internalize those advantages and cultivate my career? And if you are from a locationally disadvantaged area, I urge you, go back to your community. Be the example that the kids can look to say, look, I don't just have to be an athlete, I just don't have to be a musician. There's more ways in this world that I can make a difference and have a purposeful life. Be the example they look to, be the one who inspires them. And in doing so, you can shape the future. Thank you.